So the agenda for today is going to be the job application template and the interview business process. All right, so I'll go ahead and begin. We're going to talk about the requisition. We'll review that, and then we'll talk about how does the candidate actually apply to it. We'll look at the external career site, and then we'll look at the process and the questions that the candidate has to answer when they're applying. And that is part of the application template. So here I'm proxied as James Moore, who is the recruiter for the sales org. And I'm going to go to his recruiting hub. So here we see that he has his candidate pipeline, which has 4 candidates in the offer stage. And down here, if I look at the offer task, he has 1 candidate who's in the offer stage, and there should be another candidate I created that was in background check. And so what we'll do is we will, from the external career site, we will apply to this and go through these steps. And I wanted to just pull up the I want to pull up the career site. Remember, for a particular job organization or a supervisory organization like this one, you go to the staffing tab to see which requisitions are available to fill and which ones have need to be in various stages. So these are available to fill, and the status, and if there was any that are not available to fill, they will also be listed here. So this is the one that I created earlier. And if we click on the candidates, we'll see 2 candidates that have applied to it. So these 2 candidates have applied to it. And we'll go through that process of applying one more time from the end user perspective, from the candidate. And under the details, you could see the details of this requisition. And one thing I wanted to show you is if there was any questionnaire that was attached, they're listed here. But when we were creating the requisition, these were fields in which we needed to answer which questionnaire we wanted to populate or to use. And same thing for there's a field over here that shows which default position template is going to be used. So it's listed here, job application template. So it's using the default template. Okay, so that's where you find which one is using. So once you create a job application template, you could actually, based on some conditional rules, for example, if it's an intern requisition, you could create a rule that says for all of the intern requisitions, I want to use this particular template. And or if it's a management type of requisition, then you create a rule for that. Okay, so I just wanted to show you where the job application template is, so you know which one is being used. So it's right here. Okay. Now, what if you need to edit this requisition, or you need to make changes to it, right? Where would we do that from? So it's, sometimes Workday does not make it easy to find where to do things from. So you go to Actions, and you would think that there is something called like Edit, but I don't see anything Edit, right? Who would know that it's actually under Job Change, right? You have to go to Edit Job Requisition, and you could edit it from there. If, for example, the company is no longer going to hire, then you could freeze it. Or they decide that they just want to close it all together. Like freeze means you could unfreeze it later and use it again. So that's when you don't want to close it. But all of that menu is under job change. I know intuitively it doesn't make sense, but that's where the menu is. And there you could also create a interview team, the team that's going to interview for this requisition directly from here. And if you have calendar set up with Outlook or Google, that would also be set up on the back end, and you could assign it from here. Manage job freeze, move job requisition. So it's all over here. And for actually manage the interview team, yeah, we could do it from here. And you could select a previously created team, and then they would just populate, or you could create the interviewer team. So Joy is the hiring manager. And we want it to be for 30 minutes. It's going to be the type of interview type, could be phone. If you wanted to specify which type of competencies you want the interview to ask for, you could select them from here. So say, for example, under knowledge, you have domain expertise. So this tells the interviewer like what kind of questions to ask or what things to probe. And if there was any questionnaire that you had created, you could select that. You could put in some notes for the interviewer team. And you could put some additional interviewers. Okay, so you know how we created that team? But in order to create the interview, there's a couple of setups that need to happen. So let me walk you through some of these security setups. Okay, so in order to set that up, you have to set up the recruiting domain. In the recruiting functional area, there's one area called setup interviews. So you want to make sure that you have that assigned to the recruiter and to the HR partner. And you also need to create interview scheduling location types. So within Workday, you could have, maybe you'll create cubicles, Like normally location is just like their work location. It could be their building number. But for interviewing purposes, you'll need to create some location types, such as you may call it cubicles, or you may call it interview offices, so that when you're setting up the interview, you could select those location types. You would also create competencies, like we saw that example. Competencies are skills related to a particular behavior or job. So you could create them based on your business requirements, and you would also, as a prerequisite, create the questionnaire. And Workday allows different types of interviews. So there's you could do in the job application business process, you could set up one or more interview stages. You could have a team, and then you could set up a rating scale that the interviews will use. And just so that you're aware, the domain security policies that you need to edit are the ones that listed here. So make sure the recruiter, recruiting admin, manager, management team, they're all added to these domains. And the rating scale for the interview, that's under the task called Maintain Interview Feedback Ratings. And then there's also the Maintain Interview Types. On the, I do touch upon some of the domain setups and the edit security policy, but that's that's a whole different domain by itself. But remember, I showed you guys how to navigate to any domain, right? As far as the navigation is concerned, domain, fund, area, and then you could enter any of those domains. Here I'm signed in as a recruiter, so I won't have access to the security, but remember, this is the pathway to get to any domain and to see who currently has access to it and who needs to be added by modifying the domain security policy. Yeah. And then after that, I was just saying the navigation to the domain is going to be from the domain functional area. This domain fun area, and then you could navigate to any. Here I'm logged in as the recruiter, so he probably doesn't have access to that. And then there was a question that if you want to modify the security policy on the business process, is that separate from the domain? And yes, it is, because for any business process, you go to the business process and then say, for example, job. But back to the interviews. So a couple of things you need to know about the interview tables. There's one called Maintain Interview Feedback. Maintain Interview Feedback. So let me proxy as login. Okay, so we're going to maintain interview feedback ratings. So if you want to modify the interview scale, and usually recommendation is you have no more than 5 rows usually 3 to 5. So in this case, one would be do not recommend, recommend with reservations, or highly recommended. If you need to modify that, or you need to edit that, it's under maintain interview feedback ratings. And another thing that you need to be aware of is the maintain interview types. And then obviously there's maintain interview rooms as well. So interview types would be the type of interviews that you could set up for. So phone, video, or in person. So that's where the information is coming from. And then the related business process to the interview is called BP interview. And BP interview process is part of the part of the dynamic recruiting process. But here you want to make sure that the routings are correct. So the task for scheduling the interview and manage interview feedback or make interview decision. Here, one part is very critical. Notice this is schedule interview. Okay. In the past, there used to be a task called schedule interview team. If you see schedule interview team, that will not work with any Outlook or Google integration. So if you're at a company and they want to use they want to integrate the scheduling with Outlook, you have to make sure that this is schedule interview. It should not say schedule interview team. What schedule interview does is that if you have an integration to Outlook or Google set up at the edit tenant, then it will create a meeting request in Outlook. But if you have schedule interview team, it will not do that. So that's the new functionality added, and you want to make sure that this always just says schedule interview, not schedule interview team. And you could have these steps in there and make sure the roles are correct. And you could have schedule interview and then manage interview feedback and then make interview decision. There should also be one for, it might be in another business process, not under global modern services, but the rate interview. So, where we saw the rating scale, that should also be a step that's included in the business process for interview. So the rate interview process. Okay. So this is the business process for interview. It's going to be different for each org or each company. And okay, so we talked about the interview. Now let me navigate back to the job application. Here I'm going to go back to the next one I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys the Career Center, the external Career Center settings, and then I'm going to get the link of that website from here, and then we'll go to that link from the front end and then apply to a job. So edit Career Center. not centers, career site. Okay, so this tells us the URL where it's located. So let me copy that. I know I'm supposed you should be able, like normally you should be able to click on it, but because we're accessing it through the remote desktop, it doesn't recognize it that way, so I just copied it. And a couple other things over here, like when you're setting up the career page or the career site, you make sure all of these sections that start with apply, make sure these are filled in, right? Because this is what, when the candidate is applying, these are the questions that he or she is going to see. So you need to make sure these are filled in if you're going to use them. So how did you hear about us, the sources? The veteran question. So when we're applying, we'll see these questions coming up, and this is the source from where those questions come from. Okay, so I'm going to close the remote desktop. Okay. So this is a very simple external career site that was set up on the back end, and just a standard header, sign in, search filters for the jobs and the jobs that were posted. So here is the requisition that I had created, 714. So I'm going to go ahead and apply to it. One quick way is to just upload the resume. And then Workday Recruiting has a fantastic parsing engine, and you'll see that it will parse everything correctly. Okay, it didn't pick up all the digits. So this question, how did you hear about us? Remember we saw this on the external career site setup, right? These were the choices that were listed there. And if you worked there before. So another thing is I'm going to change I'm going to put Ramesh 2. Let me make it Ramesh 3. Okay. Oh, I need to give it a new email address. Okay, so you see how these are different sections. Work experience. The reason work experience showed here is because it's part of the application. Sorry, not application. It's part of the part of the template, and I'll show you guys where that is. It's part of the job application template. So you could choose to have this field or this section. And if you do have that section, then which fields that you want to have on here. Okay, the education section, you could choose to have that or not. Certifications, skills, languages. When we look at the template, you'll see these areas were listed on there. And that's where they're showing up for the candidate to answer. But these are not required because they were not marked required on the template. Obviously, something is required. Company name. Okay. Then these next questions, they're also coming from the Career Center setup. Okay, so I'm gonna, as an external candidate, I'm gonna go ahead and apply to this job. And then there's email notifications that are set up. And it's saying that go ahead and create an account. That way you could log back in and check the status. Okay, so now I have submitted it, and then there's also what's called the candidate home. This is where the candidate could come and see what they have applied for and the status as well. So here's the status. This text and the text that's over here. Remember we saw this on the Career Center, not the Career Center, the Career site, and we could edit it from there. If as the candidate you need to update your contact information, you could do that from here. Okay. So now let's go back into our training server, and we see this applicant there. I'm going to proxy as the recruiter. Okay. What's the name of the recruiter? James Moore. Okay, so we go to the recruiting hub. Okay, so here we see the candidate's information, and then it's in the default review stage right now. And here's the uploaded resume. The experience is also listed here, and contact information. Okay, so so before I take action on this one, I wanted to go to the recruiting hub actually. Okay, so this is where the recruiter is going to be working from, right? And I want to see, like, we have to make sure that the candidates are listed here. So we have ready for hire, employee agreement, okay, offer task. So normally the recruiter would just go up here and based on the filters, see anybody who's new, who has applied recently, and then take action from there. So you could select one or multiple ones and then move them forward or decline them. Or if you want to review their profile, you would click here. So let's go to their profile. So Workday will create the candidate's profile. It looks very similar UI to the employee profiles, with all of the data, hiring manager, recruiter, and what is what step you're in. Okay. And then it has the resume here as well. And from here, you could do the job requisition, etc. And it says right here, the review decision is like how do you want to proceed, basically, as part of the review process. So let me scroll down here. So here, I'm going to move them forward. And then you'll see like what are the possible next steps. So move selected candidate to the next stage. So which stage and then which step of that stage. Okay. So we're going to put them we're going to skip the screening, we're going to skip the assessment, we're going to put them into the interview stage. And within the interview stage, there's different steps, right? There might be different types of interviews, or there might be you might have phone interview first and then in person. So we're going to move them to the interview stage. So here we see that he's in the interview step. And then under the awaiting me, like that's my to-do things. So I could go ahead and schedule the interview. Is there an error message? Okay, it took a while to show up, but okay. So here's the proposed interview team because I had set that up earlier. And so that's why I defaulted in the interviews. I need to give it a date. Then obviously you could modify it if there was multiple interviewers. Yeah, I'm going to do at 10 p.m. Here you could send a message to the interviewer, and you need to make sure that in your edit tenant, you have set it up so that you could send an email directly to the interviewer. And then with any additional text that you want to add, any instructions, maybe you want to add an evaluation guide, and then you go ahead and submit it. So if I go to the hiring manager inbox, he should have an item for the interview. Okay, so the hiring manager has the interview item in his inbox, and I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to pretend that the interview has already happened. I'm going to fill out the form. Here's the rating that was from the rating step. And so this was for, we selected the different competencies. So how did the interview rate with respect to that competency? So what type of knowledge they had, based on this criteria. So as per the candidate, what needs to be at a workplace. And then there's the overall feedback. This was the three-step scale that we saw earlier. Okay, so the hiring manager submitted this information. Let's see how it looks from the recruiter's dashboard. So the recruiter could see the responses, and then they have to submit it as well, because that's how it's set up in order to proceed. So now as the recruiter, you're going to go ahead and review that feedback, submit it, and then move the candidate to the next stage. Okay. So now the interview decision step showed up. And we're going to move forward. Let's move forward to the offer. Okay. And then we could see the offer letter. Remember yesterday we saw the offer letter template and how to create one, and some text that I added in there, just editing it. And we could go ahead and submit it. Okay, so here we saw, as the external candidate, we applied through that job application template and the process. And so I want to show you guys where that template is located and how to navigate or how to modify it or create your own. So let's just go through it in instruction form first. Okay, so we're going to talk about the job application template. The template just means the fields and the steps that we want the candidate to go through, right? So I'm listing the domains for that. And if you want to see, for the first time, if you want to create job application template, then it would be the create job application template rule. And here, you could actually create condition rules that says based on the type of job rec, you could apply that particular template. And then if you want to modify or existing ones, then it's the maintain job application template task. if during the process, like when you submit it and you go to the interview stage, and then, or when when you're creating the requisition, and if you want the recruiter to select which template to use at that time, like instead of defaulting, well, it will still default, but if you want to give the recruiter the option to select which template to use, then within the job requisition business process, you need to include the review job application template step. Then the recruiter will get a step in their inbox to select which template to use. But in our case, we're using the default one, but let me show you guys where to go to create a new one or to maintain an existing one. For this, I'm going to proxy as login. Okay, so if you go to maintain job application templates, there's the default template, but we see this table with condition rules and the job application template. And so the condition rules, basically just like we saw, how to create conditions during the advanced comp or benefit rule conditions. These conditions are created the same way. They have to be unique to each row. You can't have the same condition. And these are the different types of templates that have been created. Obviously, there's multiple ways to navigate and create a new job template. But you could also click on Add Row, and then from here, you could create a job application template. So you give it a name. So we give a template a name. And these are the different, in this column, are the different sections we saw when we were applying as the candidate. Remember, there was the certifications section. You have the ability to rename it. You may call it degree. I mean, whatever, that makes sense. You could put some kind of instruction text, and then whether or not you want this field to show up. So you have hide for all, require for all, or based on a certain security group. So I'm going to choose hide for all. If you do a hide for all, then you can't have any of the fields like populated with your text. And there's additional fields here, like certification numbers. If you did use this field, let me make this big, full screen. Okay. So you could put in, for these particular sections or fields, you could hide or require. So we're going to say certifications high for all. Usually education section is also hidden because it's already part of the resume.
Ramesh, multiple job application templates, are they primarily used for internal versus external, or even within, or is there any other classification? I mean, generally on the client side, we'll want.
They're usually for the external candidates, right? Because for the internal candidates, the system is only going to pull in the it's going to pull in their work experience from their profile, and
Okay.
there's one more section that I mentioned in our first session.
My question is, so primarily job application templates should be two types. One is for internal, where it pulls, and the other one is for external candidates who need to provide the information. Is that, or is there any other criteria generally used? I mean, rationale for creating additional templates?
Like what you're saying, what is the rationale for creating different templates?
Yes, other than these internal versus external candidates.
Yes. So it could be like interns. For interns, you may not need that work experience section, right?
Right. Also degree completion probably.
Yes. Yeah. And competencies or skills, they're more important at the higher level jobs. Well, skills are not, but
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So those would
Right.
be the different criteria. Languages section, typically not something that's relevant. Skills, labels. Work experience, this has a lot of fields. And so you do have to give it a condition. I'm not going to create a new condition rule, so it's not going to accept my change. But an example of these would be like, here's this condition rule that I created earlier is for like based on the supervisory org, like if the requisition was in any of these orgs, then use that template. So or this was for manager level job requisitions or like an intern. In that case, it's more like focused on education. So it's all under maintain job application templates.